Head off a little bit. Here we go. We got a song for y'all.
20 long years. I smoked lots of reefer and drank lots of beer. Every day at 420, we're gonna settle the score. And for 20 long years, it's been 20 past 4.
Hello, welcome back to 420 Live. Jeff Kravitz, your affable, unflappable host, coming to you once again. We're almost, I think we're at show 192, coming to you live in the 420 slot now. Since pandemic started, and while pandemic's continuing, and while we're watching the whole world burn down in front of us, I am dubbing today's show Impeachment Comes Alive. A nod to our friends on Live for Live Music, and Ari Finkel was on the show earlier this week because we are going to bring the Donald up on charges today. We have our good friend Noel Casler waiting to come on. We'll bring him out here in a sec. But, you know, what we saw the past 24 hours, folks, was nothing short of mind-boggling. We saw the Congress in the middle of reading off the votes all of a sudden stop. And then in the time that the whole place got raided, where the authorities didn't show up for 3 hours and let everybody run riot. I'm surprised they weren't in the kitchen back there making lunch for all the guys in the congressional kitchen. They didn't seem to find the cafeteria. I don't think they were looking for it. But anyway, I digress. What we saw was nothing short of astounding. And, you know, today I was looking around and I found this amazing Instagram site I need to share with you guys, because I really feel that, you know, we have to help the FBI, because there's all this, you know, garbage they're throwing up now about how it wasn't really, you know, this wasn't really, you know, this was Antifa. These weren't Trump supporters. These are Antifa. You definitely know they weren't BLM. I mean, of course, BLM supporters come in every color, but you know what I'm saying. The movement didn't show up. But there's this homegrown terrorist site. And if you scroll down, you can see the biggest terrorist of all. We already named him. But they'll put the pictures up here of the people they want to find. Oh, really? Kevin Federline? That's news. See the things you learn on these sites. Yeah, they're trying to find out who this girl is. And they'll give you a couple pictures here so you can help identify if she's in your friend feed or you notice any of these guys. They found this poor guy, and he was huffing on a fatty, and I think he said it was Pinkberry was the strain when the guy asked him. But God bless the internet and all these tools that we have out there. So get on your homegrown terrorist Instagram site, and you too can name some of the people that are, you know, you can help the FBI, because obviously they don't know what the hell they're doing. Yesterday was just unbelievable brain fart on. If it was the Russians, they would have gone in and literally would have been making borscht by the time the guys showed up. They would have had full control of the whole Senate. If people went in there with real weapons, there would be dead senators and congressmen up everywhere. God forbid that happens, especially with the elections we just went through. But it's really, you know, you question your sensibility, because you see one thing, you understand what's happening, and as soon as the other side gets a hold of it, they start to poke holes in it. Trump didn't want to send everybody down to the Capitol. He didn't tell everybody to go there to fight. You know, you can only take so much bullshit, but you got to give them credit for holding on tight to these morals as they go. But the most amazing thing we saw yesterday in that break, in that 4 to 5 hour break where they took off and they were sitting, hiding wherever the hell they were. I was wondering if they had, you know, they probably had some snacks and stuff for the guys. But all of a sudden, the senators who were all going to fight were like, what the hell are we doing? They all got it. It was like, we needed something like this to move the conversation past the point where these guys are just blowing smoke everybody's ass just to make the scene, to cloud the scenery. People understand what's happening in the power, and all these guys that are inciting violence. It's one thing to incite it. It's another thing when it's knocking on your door. So I think everybody got the fear of Jesus yesterday, and a lot of people, whether they went up there and tried to pull that act off later to fight the votes or not, they got it. And when they came back, they were contrite. And some of the best speeches I've ever seen out of Mitch McConnell and Mike Pence, that, I mean, inspired. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, there's human beings inside these people. Today, Noel Casler. Are there human beings inside these people? Let's bring Noel in and we're going to have some fun. Hi, Noel. How you doing?
Hey, Jeff. How are you, brother?
It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Well, we almost made it a week, right? 5 days into 2021 before everything hit the fan.
Yeah, we had a little window there, and probably just because of the way the New Year's fell, right? It fell on that weekend. But, on that Sunday, we got the phone call.
Exactly.
Well, what did you think when you heard the phone call?
I said, that's who he is. You're hearing how he's spoken to people for the last 50 years. That's Donald Trump. He sort of bullies people in a mob fashion. And if you listen to that phone call, it was the same thing for an hour. It was like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I need you to do me this favor. I hear what you're saying, but I need you to do me this favor. He had one objective: to get them to deliver him 11,781 votes or whatever it was. And he wasn't taking no for an answer. And if you've ever gotten cold called by a salesman, that's the gig. You just don't accept no, and you come at it from every angle. First he threatened him, then he flattered him. So it's Trump. It's a mob boss looking out for his own interests.
Now, we saw this same phone call happen, which led to his impeachment the first time, where Susan Collins said, I think he learned his lesson. Obviously didn't learn his lesson, and this is what he's been doing the whole time. My question is, Georgia didn't have enough votes, electoral votes, to swing the election. So if Georgia was his play for 19 electoral votes, where was he going to get the rest of them? What was the plan?
That's a good point. I think they were going to try to just plunge it into sort of electoral chaos. I think if they could flip Georgia, it would have bought them enough time to try and go back and try to flip Pennsylvania. They had the same sort of like gum in the works, so to speak, for other states. Georgia just became the focal point because there was also the recount election, which was good news that was overshadowed yesterday. We took back control of the Senate because of people showing up to vote. So democracy is marching on, in spite of the thuggery that we've seen, but he'll never stop this. I mean, we saw what happened yesterday, and he's still leaning on people to try, GOP members to try and swing it in his favor, because he knows the opposite side of this is jail, financial sort of ruin. He has all that debt coming due. So the guy I know would stop at nothing. None of this surprises me.
Some of the things I've been reading is how he's setting himself up for the future. There was an interesting interview with Michael Cohen the other day. I don't know if you caught it, but it was with a guy that had interviewed him last year when he was when he was still working with Trump. He interviewed him, and then he interviewed him after he got out of jail. And the interview is absolutely astounding. And he just says that what Trump wants to do is he realizes he has 20 million people out there that are hardcore followers that will do anything he says. And what he wants to do is charge the Trump network, charge them all $5 each a month to subscribe to his network. That'll give him $100 million a month. There you go, $1.2 billion a year in his pocket. And, that's his plan, is he's setting himself up for what's going to come next, which is where he tries to dominate the airways and remove Fox. What's your take?
That's exactly my take. I mean, I didn't hear the interview, but I've been saying the same thing for months. He knows Rush Limbaugh is on his way out of the door, right? Rush isn't going to be around that much.
Well, because Rush is dying, not because
I was trying to be, yeah.
He literally he can't speak. He has no air left. I mean, I'm not laughing because cancer sucks and it's taken many a life from me. So I'm not happy when anybody gets cancer, but there is karma that it happened in his lungs, and that's what he uses to speak. I mean, there's all this karmic slapback coming. I feel the karmic slapback. I felt it yesterday before this all started. The day started so great where we knew we were going to get Ossoff in. We had an amazing Merrick Garland. What's your take on that selection?
That's amazing. That's amazing. And talk about just desserts from Mitch McConnell, that Merrick will be the guy to investigate all the malfeasance of the last 4 years, because Merrick will go after them.
Do you think? I mean, I've seen that as a big discussion point where Mitt Romney and people are saying not to go after Trump when this is all over, and other people are saying you have to go after Trump because then he'll run again. They have to go after him, right?
They absolutely do. And the irony of this whole situation yesterday is I think they might have given him a pass. I think Biden would have been less inclined to go after him if yesterday didn't happen. And if Trump back in November said, okay, I lost, I'm going to do like you just said, I'll go start my radio network. I'll have MAGA rallies and charge $25 a head to get in. He'll make money and be happier as a post president than as a president. So if he had just had an ounce of self-control and discipline and grace about him and conceded and moved on, he probably could have escaped any charges and the Justice Department turning over every rock, so to speak. Now, I think you have to do it as a matter of principle for the good of our democracy. Forget about politics now. What kind of example are we setting for future generations when we let a guy come in and pillage for 4 years, start a riot, let his followers put their feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk, right? And then just walk away. These guys were smoking cigars last night in their hotel rooms in DC, in the lobbies, laughing about the carnage that they unleashed. There has to be repercussions.
You would think so, but the one article I saw before he came to the air is now he's going to pardon himself.
Yeah, well, that's why, though. So now we're getting into it, right? That's why you have to impeach him. That's why you have to apply the 25th Amendment before he can do that. He still has the powers of the presidency. Impeach him. Bring him up on charges next week. You could have him impeached by this time next week, and then he can't pardon himself and his kids. And then we can hold him accountable for the criminality and the damage that he's done to this country. Because he's a guy who's gotten away with everything his whole life. He's powerful. He's rich. It's more trouble than it's worth to sue him, so he gets away with stuff. He attacked a woman in Bergdorf Goodman in a dressing room, a famous woman he sexually assaulted. She knew him. He knew her. She wrote a column. You know what I mean? It wasn't like in an alley with a ski mask on. He did it in broad daylight. That's a guy who knows he's going to get away with it, and that's the guy I worked with. He knew he could fondle the Miss Universe contestants because who's going to stop me? I own the pageant, and everybody sort of backed away from him because they let that intimidate them. And you can't let that. You have to stand on principle. I don't care how much money you have or how much power you have. You need to be held accountable to laws of basic human decency. And he's a guy who has it. I'll say one more thing and I'll shut up.
Please.
If Trump had, I tell this to people all the time, if you want to know who the guy is, he was a bad seed from the beginning. He's a guy who threw rocks at the neighbor's baby, who punched a teacher. He was sent to reform school, military school, reform school for rich kids. He tried to throw his neighbor or his roommate out of the window. If Trump had grown up poor in the Bronx instead of rich in Jamaica Estates, Queens, he would have been dead or in jail by 20, because somebody else's dad would have either kicked his ass, or some cop would have arrested him for all the crazy stuff he did. He was rich and people kept bailing him out. First his father, then his lawyers, then his business partners. And you know how complicated the world is. In New York, if you go into business with somebody and build a big skyscraper, have money invested in that guy, and he's kicking out kickbacks to cops and to Mary Giuliani and all this stuff.
Well, come on, he was a mobster, so we know that was going on.
Exactly.
He used money to pave the way to make his life easier. When you started working with him, when did you realize, how long did it take you to figure it out?
It didn't take long. I mean, you saw it in, I've told this story on here before, in the pageants in the 90s when he lined up. This is how I saw how the world treats Donald Trump, right? The first year of the pageants, it's a live TV broadcast. You're familiar with that. You got DGA cameramen sitting around getting $600 an hour. You got stage managers. It's costing a lot of money. 10 minutes is $500,000 in that context, right? So they were about to shoot a rehearsal of all these contestants, and Trump comes out, lines them up on the stage and spends an hour inspecting them. That's when he stuck his fingers in their mouth and he's checking their teeth. He's making little notes. He's having little side conversations with the ones that he likes, the ones that look like his daughter.
Yeah, come to my penthouse.
Right, exactly. You want to win, come and see me, right? So, he's getting what he wants out of the situation, which is to look powerful and to sort of, for lack of a better term, sort of molest these contestants, who have to stand there and can't go anywhere.
So you saw it first in the Miss Universe when you work in Miss Universe, and then you went to the Apprentice after working the Apprentice special.
Right, exactly. It was 10 years apart. But here's the lesson I learned. When he did that the first year and everybody was disgusted and cameramen went home and told their wives and ADs were all disgusted about it, you think, well, he won't get away with that. You know what I mean? NBC Universal won't air that. Someone will put their foot down. This is what they did. The next year, it was written into the schedule, the production schedule, Trump inspects pageant contestants. No union call. Do you know what I mean? No utilities call. So they let the the employees have an hour off, basically. They worked around his, I don't even know what they worked around his
peccadillos is what it is.
Right, exactly. So they just made sure it didn't cost them any money, but they allowed him to do that. So that was a big lesson in who Trump is. It's like, if you're involved with him and there's money to be made, people will go out of their way to get a piece of that money and not make waves. And that's what created Trump. And so jump ahead to The Apprentice. Clearly, it's 10 years later. He's completely unhinged. He's using racial epithets all the time. And he's snorting Adderall and defecating on himself, wearing Depends, because he deteriorated. He wasn't the same guy at 49 that he was at 59. He doesn't take care of himself, eats cheeseburgers, hamburgers all day.
Right. So, because, yes. Right. He really wasn't in the market then. Right.
Right.
I guess he was never really. He was always married, wasn't he?
He always had a wife. Yeah. But he was always, he was always out every night in nightclubs, hitting on models and, escorts and things like that.
What a prince. Now, you were telling me that you worked at the Capitol.
Yeah, I was a bike messenger for the Congressional Budget Office. I was like their in-house bike messenger. So I was a courier in DC, and they were such a big account, it was like a freelance gig, So I didn't work directly for the CBO, but I was a guy who was placed in the library of the Congressional Budget Office to basically sit there all day, and I'd get a call and they'd say, such and such law firm down on K Street needs a copy of House Document 2781, So then I'd go across the street into the Capitol. And back then the House Document Room was in the rotunda of the Capitol, and you'd go in there and you'd write the number on a little slip of paper and you'd hand it to this guy and he'd give you the law, a little booklet that was the document that the Senate, or the Congress had just passed. And I'd write it down to a senator's office or a law firm or something like that. And I did that for years. And it was a great job, and back then there was Capitol Hill police, right? So you weren't getting in there if they didn't want to get you in there. I remember in 1989, it was Halloween day and I dressed up with a Ronald Reagan mask on my head, and I tried to walk into the Capitol, and a couple of the cops were like, I knew you'd be back, sir. They were playing along with it. And then they were like, dude, take the mask off. You can't come in here with your face covered, And they were like, the one rule about Capitol Hill cops is like, they own the joint. You know what I mean? It was their ground. You couldn't run a red light on your bike on Capitol Hill. They were hardcore about that kind of stuff. So when I saw yesterday, I was like, that didn't happen without people standing down. They
were definitely overwhelmed. I mean, one of the things I heard yesterday was some of the cops telling the protesters, hey, look, I got a family, I got a wife, I want to see my kids, because they realized that they were being challenged and they were outnumbered. They definitely did not have the proper security. And I believe I heard one of the senators say he looked out the window an hour before that they started the arguments. He looked out, or the count, he looked out the window and he saw the crowds and he goes, wow, we don't have enough security for the amount of people out there. And then an hour later, they were interrupted in the middle of it. I got it. It definitely seems to me like they purposefully did not staff it the way they should have.
Absolutely. I mean, no one's saying that the Capitol Hill police are the ones that should have basically been left to fight off, the crowd. That's not their gig. They're not riot cops. They don't have armor. They're not that guys. But they are the guys that keep you from coming in the building, So they shouldn't have been put in that position. And it was clear to anybody who was paying attention that Trump was going to incite a crowd. The last thing he said was, you're not losers. We didn't lose. You never concede when they steal the election. Now go march up there. So he clearly told them to do that. Anybody who's paying attention knew it was coming. If you looked in the summer, that the guys that were guarding the Capitol when the BLM, protests were happening, you saw Kevin Mazur, our buddy, posted that picture of it. These guys look like stormtroopers. You weren't getting through them. And that sort of security should have been applied. You've been to the Super Bowl. It would be 10 times harder to get on the field at the Super Bowl than it was to get into the speaker of the Congress's office yesterday and put your boots on the table.
Unbelievable.
It was mind-boggling. And so to watch it, it felt personal. Back to your question, it was like a violation because I liked working up there. I ate in the cafeteria every day. Back then, you'd see Paul Simon, the senator, walking around, and Ted Kennedy. I ran into Bob Weir in Ted Kennedy's office one time, which was like, I thought I was tripping. Because back then you just go in and you'd put this thing down in their office. There wasn't like a mailroom. Like you delivered right to that guy, basically, you know. And I'll tell the story real quick because I promised, you know, I would. So I walk into, you know, it was the summer, like after the kind of summer, you know, they used to play RFK every year. The Dead did, you know, there in DC on the stadium tours, early 90s. I walk in, drop this envelope down on a desk where I expect to see this staffer who was there every day when I drop this stuff off. And I look up and it's Bob Weir just looking at me. And I'm like, oh my God, like it's Bob Weir. Is this happening? And I couldn't say a word. Like I was just stunned. You know, somebody like me who talks all the time was like, oh my God. And I walk over to this other staffer and I'm staring at Bob and I see his entourage and he's got like the hottest hippie chick you've ever seen with him and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. And the guy signs the package and I don't say a word. I walk out. I'm walking down the hallway. I'm like, that was your big chance, man. Like, go back in there and meet Bob Weir, you know? So I turn around and I walk back just as Bob's leaving. I don't say anything to him, but I go back in the office and the staffer was having a phone conversation and he sees me come back in. He goes, hold on. Yeah, dude, it was him. So, but my point is that's how Capitol Hill was. I saw Nelson Mandela when he came back, you know, to be honored by a joint session of Congress. It was the people's house. You know, the best thing about DC, at least in those days, is that it was accessible. You know, like that's the point of our democracy, is that it's an open thing. You know, the White House is the people's house. But that was all based on a bit of an honor system. And somebody like Trump is somebody who takes advantage of that. And that's what we're seeing now. And again, that's why he has to be held accountable. Because you don't come back from something like this unless you do hold him accountable.
I was just so astounded watching the whole thing. I mean, I when I saw them hit the building and go up the steps, I didn't really think that they were going to get in. Did you think that they were going to get in?
No, I was stunned. And you know, there's more to that. Like they knew where to go in. They went into the front of the Capitol, which is the east side. They went in where you go in if you're getting dropped off in a car. There's a lot less security there than there is on the east and west side of the Capitol, which are barricaded, you know, and somewhat fortified. So they knew where to get in and they knew where to go right when they got in. And if you also look at some of those guys that were scaling the walls, they took the bike racks, as they call them in slang, you know, the barricades, they turned them sideways and used them as ladders.
Yeah, and then they got up into the grooves of the actual building and used that.
You don't just do that when you show up on a scene. You do that if you've been thinking about what you're going to do when you get there. That's premeditated. You know, that's like they were raiding the place. And
well, they said they were planning it for weeks on social networks, on websites like Parler. They're talking about it and very open that it was going to happen. Everybody knew that it was coming. Even the president encouraged it, but they didn't have the people down there. Now there's 7-foot fences around the Capitol as of today.
Right.
And they're still say it's not that safe. They still say that it's got holes all over it.
And that's what's so scary. It's like Trump built a big 2 fences around the White House 6 months ago. You know, when the protests were happening down there, he was putting a big, huge fence around the White House. Went up in June. You know, a week ago, somebody blew up an RV in Nashville. You know, one of his Q kind of white homegrown terrorists, whatever you want to call them. It's not like FBI didn't know it was in the air, you know, like you said.
Was he considered a Trumper, that guy? I thought he was more like a conspiracy 5G kind of like. I
think he was, but I think that all follows under the same umbrella. It's the same basically Russian psychological ops that these guys are reading on Facebook and thinking, you know, like 5G is going to, you know, screw with their whatever. I don't even read the stuff. You know, it's the same. I don't know that he was a Trumper, but he was the same QAnon conspiracy, you know, easily manipulated to the point that he's willing to take a violent action on his homegrown turf. You know, that's terrorism.
Yeah. And unfortunately, someone got killed yesterday inside the Capitol, which hasn't happened in a long time.
Yeah.
Since 1812, I believe, was the last time there's insurrection and that kind of fighting in there. When I saw her videos, did you catch any of her videos?
I saw that they're on there. To me, it's so heartbreaking. I haven't been able to watch
it's her ranting and raving, foaming at the mouth, Trump supporter, just going at it, like how she's going to change everything and how what's happened in the election. Like she's just like spewing the company line. And, you know, you're just like I felt bad at first that she went in there and then you realize that they're going in there to do damage. Do you think they were going in there to get the votes? Was that their intention?
Oh, definitely. I mean, and those two staffers were heroes. There's two female staffers that walked out this ancient mahogany case that they keep them in. Yeah, and also what I wonder about is like how many guys in there might have been like with Eric Prince or something. Like somebody could have gone in there and put a hard drive into a computer, you know, downloaded some malware into the systems. There's a reason that stuff is secure. And back to your point, when I saw them scaling the walls and stuff, I'm like, the line of succession for the United States, the first three people are the president, the vice president, and the speaker of the House. Two of those people are inside that building right now. You know what I mean? And dudes, thousands of them are climbing the back terrace and breaking windows to get at them. To me, that was mind-boggling. Like, you know, we come from the same world. Like, can you imagine trying to bum rush Beyonce's dressing room?
Or
like
even the Oscars.
Right. Bingo. Exactly. You would get beat down before you reach the parking lot. You know, if you tried to,
you wouldn't even get to the metal detectors.
Exactly. You would never make it to the red carpet, you know? And these guys, while the second and third in command of the United States were in there, the thing gets bum rushed. And not only that, the guys breached the building, which means they had to, like you were saying in the opening, they had to bring these guys to a secure location, right? Those locations necessarily didn't have secure CENTCOM commands and phones and stuff. So what if, God forbid, Trump has a heart attack while that's all going on, you know, or somebody attacks us or something? It means you basically have nobody in charge of the most powerful nation on earth for this period of time when this chaos was allowed to happen.
Well, there was nobody in charge anyway, because Trump sat on his fucking hands and watched the whole thing from a tent. I saw him watching it today, and his son cheering it on, like, go get him, guys. This is it. Proud of what they've done. And then he did not want to react. He didn't. They made him do a video that he ad-libbed the part about him still winning the election, which ended up getting him banned off Twitter.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how they give the guy who's got control, he's got control of the nuclear football, but he can't tweet.
Right. Or be on Facebook. He's banned from Facebook for life.
Instagram.
Instagram. Right.
He's just unbelievable. Like watching the whole thing unfold, unbelievably mind-boggling, and watching the lack of response. And the thing that just keeps resonating with me is if that was an attack by Russians or was an attack by anybody, or those guys were well armed and they went in there, they would have killed everybody in the freaking building. They could have blown up the entire building. They could have done way worse damage than going in there and taking a bunch of selfies and, you know, throwing papers in the air. I think that if they were more organized and knew that they were actually going to get in, do you think that they thought that they would be able to get in when they had the plan?
I don't. And you're right. If they had been more, you know, organized, they would have taken the building. They could have held all those people hostages. You know, we could be at a standoff now, 24 hours later, they could still be like, we got your Speaker of the House in there, you know, and God knows what kind of damage they could do, you know, or a foreign nation could do to us with that kind of power.
Yeah, the fact that they were able to get back in and finish the session, and I watched it, I stayed up, you know, I'm on the West Coast, so it was easier for me to stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning, but I stayed up and watched the whole thing, and I have to say, I shed a tear at the end because it was just such an incredible day. It was so emotional for all of us because we all started on such a high, and then all of our sensibilities, we saw something we've never seen in our history before. Why do you think that it took so long? Like if the Russians came in and attacked and took over the Capitol, do you think the response time would be 3 hours? Or what happened? Like, why wouldn't you call in the army or anybody at that point?
Well, Trump, according to reporting and legitimate reporting, like in the New York Times, Trump wouldn't release the National Guard. You know, they went to him and said, you need to send in the National Guard now. And he was like, no. And his aides had to circumvent him. And they had to get, you know, Mike Pence to do it. So he, you know, it's the equivalent of like, hey, my house is on fire. And he's standing in the driveway like, hey, not so quick. Just let them flames reach the second floor for a little bit. You know, that's why it took so long, because he wanted the chaos. He wanted to stop and disrupt the count and assert his power, because this basically comes down to Trump's ego. He doesn't necessarily want to stay president. He doesn't want to be labeled a loser. You know, he's a narcissist. So this comes down to his ego death, which he sees rapidly advancing on him and willing to go to any lengths.
But don't you think that he realized that they crossed the line when they started busting windows and coming into the building, and that was the time to be like, okay, time to send in even Trump, like, this is it. These people are going to get hurt. But
you would think so, Jeff. But like you said, when he made that video, the first thing out of his mouth was, well, we won the election and it was stolen from us. You know, it wasn't like, hey, stop breaking windows. This has gone too far. You guys are nuts. Stand down. He was like, well, we won and you have a right to be mad. And I love you and I care about you and you're beautiful people. So go home now. So yes, you would think a normal human being would be shocked and horrified to see that lives were at risk and one life was lost and that property was being damaged. Trump's not a normal human being. That's what I've been trying to tell people from the beginning. He's a psychopath.
But who's his checks and balances that is standing there and just at a certain point going to be the person to say, fuck what he's saying. You got to call the National Guard now. Like, isn't there somebody there, or it has to actually come from his lips?
No, they circumvented him. You know, it took an hour or two, but they got other people to call up the National Guard and mobilize.
But in the meantime, all those people could have been dead and the whole place could have been locked down.
Right. He stalled for hours when you didn't have minutes to lose. You know, that should have been put down when they were getting on the steps on the backside of the Capitol, the west side of the Capitol. That's when it should have been put down, you know, or it's the north side of the Capitol. Anyway, he stalled long enough for a lot of damage to be done. And that's what he did. You know, he got away with something yesterday. And like you said, these guys are getting away with it. Yeah, the internet will find them or whatever. It's mind-boggling that anybody walked away from that. You know, that
the arrests or whatever it was in the building.
Right, 35 arrests. Are you kidding me? There's more arrests at a Fish concert, you know, for selling.
Great tweet. All my Fish fans appreciated the tweet where you said that better security at a Fish concert than there is at the Capitol.
Dude, it's true though. My friend John Langenstein, you know, had a lot to do with it. We all know
John, yes.
Right. And their other head of security who we lost this year, rest his soul. But it's true. You know this. Like, that was so unprofessional. You know, we work on shows in Central Park. You know, like, you would never, it's not that hard to control crowds, but how you do it is with those barricades. They shouldn't have come within a mile of the Capitol.
There should have been layers and layers of police. And even the mayor of Washington, D.C. today in an interview said that she is pushing for statehood within the first 100 days because she wants better control over the National Guard for the safety of Washington, D.C. Because she would be able to, if she was a mayor of a real city, be able to call the National Guard out herself. But because she's the mayor of Washington, D.C., she had to defer to Trump to do it, and that's where the delay came in. This is a really interesting question. We spend so much money on defense, and I saw everybody's talking about that yesterday, the trillions of dollars we spend on defense. Is there a plan for domestic attacks, and what is there a course of action?
Well, you think there would be. You think that would be the lesson that we've learned after 9/11?
Yeah, or after the first attack on the World Trade Center.
93, exactly. Right. But it's the same thing. Like there's Republicans that concerned with themselves sort of seem to gum up the works the whole time. Giuliani, after the first attack in 93, the heads of the FDNY and the counterintelligence guys were like, you need to put the command center out in Brooklyn because they're going to do this again. And we need a safe place to talk to our troops, so to speak, when this happens. And Giuliani was like, no, we're putting it down at World Trade Center because he wanted to walk from City Hall down there when something happened. So the news cameras could get shots of him looking like a hero. And of course, we all know what happened on September 11th, and it destroyed the command center, which was at number 9 World Trade Center. So there was no communication, meaning 300 firemen get sent up to a building because their radios don't work when they should have been left out on the ground because there was nothing to be done. So yes, there should be plans in place, but politics get in the way. And people that like to pretend that they're strong and for law and order, like all these Republicans that gave all the military gear from Iraq to all these civilian police departments, and now when somebody does protest in Kenosha, Wisconsin, it looks like the second coming of the Third Reich's coming down the street. But then to protect, like I said, the line of secession, and a peaceful transfer of democracy, Barney Fife is standing out there with a radio and and a baton trying to keep 3,000 people from coming up the stairs. It doesn't make sense unless it was meant to go that way, because there is a plan in place. DC is like, how many law enforcement agencies are in DC? You have municipal police, you have federal police, you have
access to everything. Like if the White House got attacked, there must be a plan for them to implement within minutes of the breach.
Of course. Let me tell you a story that kept coming into my head yesterday. I worked on both those inaugurals for Barack Obama, right? And we had these concerts at the convention center in DC, right? So the second year, I was assigned to Soundgarden, right? So Soundgarden was going to play a concert. It was going to be awesome. Like they opened for John Legend at this ball, right? But the first, hit of the night was Chris Cornell was going to sing solo at the Commander-in-Chief's ball, which is the first ball that President Obama goes to in the evening, right? And it's all the generals. It's all like the head of all these agencies, the big guns, the 5-star guys, right? And they're all sitting in this ballroom, and we sound checked. Everything was fine. We go back for the show. President Obama comes in. He's seated. Then it becomes like a no sudden movement zone. You know what I mean? Because you're right there with like all these big important people, right? Chris Cornell goes out on stage and starts to strum his guitar, and it's not live. You can't hear it, right? So this guitar tech, he looks over at me and this guitar tech like, hey, what's up? I can't hear this, And the guitar tech wants to run out there and plug it in. And I'm like, dude, if you run out there right now, you get shot because it's a shoot to kill situation. Like you can't make sudden movements and run out on stage. He's on his own. So Chris saw after a minute like nobody was coming and then just stepped away from the mic and sang on his own and filled up the room with that incredible voice he had, which was like a gift from God. And it turned into being one of the most amazing things I'd ever seen. But my point is, you were in a secure facility where there was so many layers of security. As a matter of fact, they wouldn't even let one of their sound guys into the elevator with us to get even near the president because he had like a 20-year-old prior, for a bar fight or something. That's how it was in my day. Trump changed all that. I've seen pictures of Chuck Zito slapping him on the back at the floor of Madison Square Garden. Chuck went to prison for stabbing somebody in the 80s, and the Secret Service is letting them just give a back pat to the president of the United States. Like he changed all these rules and bent them to his will, which is like I said at the top of the show about the contestants.
But even this stuff like Trump to me doesn't really have a clue at how the real mechanics work of our defense department, our society, and stuff like that. I would think that this would be something so ingrained in the way that we operate, the protection of our landmarks and our buildings, that it would be something that he wouldn't even come into his brain, like to be like, oh, we got to not protect the buildings as much or whatever. You think that you're saying I don't think that he's that micromanaging, because I think he's just like always worried about himself, right?
Right. He is. Like I tell people, Trump wants music to play when he walks in the room. He wants to get high and he wants to hit on women. He's only thinking about what he can get out of the moment. But these other guys behind him, his strategists, Jared Kushner is trying to keep him out of jail and keep himself out of jail. Stephen Miller. These guys are capable of hatching such a plan. And I think Bill Barr got wind of it. I think they started talking.
For sure. You saw his comment today.
Exactly. And you saw how he left on December 23rd. I think he was like, they about to try some hinky stuff and I'm out of here before it goes down, because it would have involved the Justice Department, so he probably got wind that there was whispers around the West Wing that they were going to try to do something to disrupt the count of the electors as a last ditch effort if all these lawsuits fell through.
Yeah. So Bill Barr, another fucking coward who ran with his tail between his legs instead of sticking around and sending the people down there to defend that building, because he had the power to do that. He sent the people down there last time. He had his prison guards and all these people that went out there when Trump wanted to take his picture with the Bible. And then when the Black Lives Matter protests were going on, they stocked the lake with these guys. And Bill Barr leaves the country unprotected. He knows what's going to go down. Instead of sticking around and showing some balls and enacting some kind of plan to help us all, he runs and okay, not my table anymore. I'm off. I'm gonna go have a cigarette.
Exactly. Well said.
That sucks, Noel. That
absolutely
sucks.
I agree, dude. And think about it. He's the guy who got the dudes acquitted for El Mozote, which was a massacre in El Salvador in the 80s. That was one of the major crimes of Iran-Contra. He got Elliot Abrams and Ollie North and these guys off from that. I mean, we slaughtered women and children in that in that massacre. And even this was too much for him. It's not like he's a Pollyanna about how ugly stuff can get. But he was
not at all. But of course, insulted his sensibilities because he knew Trump had no legs to stand on. He had already done the investigating that he asked.
Right. Right. He'd already taken care of Epstein and all that. And he knew, yes, exactly. He knew legally it wasn't ever going to work out and it was going to end up being so ugly. And Barr's not stupid. See, Trump's stupid and he'll listen to Jeffrey Epstein Stephen Miller. He'll listen to Epstein too.
He did. I'm sure he did a couple times.
Exactly. You know what I always say about that? Remember that famous clip of the two of them down at Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah.
Right. So Trump is the guy who says something to Epstein that makes Epstein double over in embarrassment, and basically blush and laugh. So think about that. Trump said something so gross to another guy who was like the biggest pedophile in the world that grossed him out. And that's Trump. He's always the sickest dude in the room, right? But anyway, he listens to these other guys. That's why he's been firing everybody. Everybody left the West Wing who wasn't going to tell him what he needed to be here about the election results. So that's why he's left with Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, like whack jobs, guys.
Oh, and that Jenna Ellis chick. I was reading about the pardons, and it was an interesting article because what it said was that he pardoned those three guys, Manafort and Stone and the first round,
right.
But he's kind of pulled back on the pardons for like Jared and the kids because it takes away their Fifth Amendment rights.
Right.
So, and he's worried more about his own skin. This was also in the Michael Cohen. You got to read this. Michael Cohen interview was absolutely fascinating. One of the things was that Cohen said that he's more interested in saving his own skin than he is in saving his children or anybody like that. He's worried that they're going to testify against him and not be able to incriminate themselves. They don't have any Fifth Amendment rights. So he's pulled back on the pardoning.
That's a fascinating and very real point, and Michael would know, and that is Trump. He would throw his own kids under the bus in a heartbeat. With the exception of Ivanka, because he obviously has he is kind of obsessed with her. She would throw them all under the bus. But yeah, like Don Jr., they hate each other. Eric, Trump, and the other point to that is he may have overplayed his hand on that thing yesterday. He may get impeached, and he may not have the same power to pardon. I think that's what he maybe didn't foresee. I think he thought he had a full month. He pardoned Charles Kushner right before Christmas and stuff. He's going to be pissed if he gave Charles Kushner a pass and he can't do it to himself,
Right. Well, that's one of the scenarios we heard that Pence, he was going to get out before the election. And, this could all be, I was thinking about it yesterday. It's not far-fetched that it's all plot. Trump let it go. Pence is part of it. And, Trump's going to have to take the 25th and bop out, and then he'll get pardoned because he's just acting like the mad king right now. Thank you, Paige. I saw your comment. You really, where do we go from here?
Nobody knows. And anybody who does is lying to you, Jeff. We've sailed so far into uncharted territories. Who knows? I mean, Nancy Pelosi asked for a 25th Amendment, articles of impeachment to be investigated or brought forward. So have many other members of Congress. And they apparently tried for a half an hour this morning, to get Mike Pence to come to the phone because Mike Pence has to be a part of that. And he just dodged the call. He wouldn't come to the phone.
Don't you think that Mike might have had, like, seeing what happened yesterday and realizing, like, what Trump said to him the past couple of weeks where he's been locking him in the room and telling him he has to cheat on this thing that he knows he can't cheat on? And he's seen Trump at his worst. He don't think that at the end he's like, oh, shit, we got to get rid of this guy. 2 more weeks. There's not going to be a country left.
Of course I do. That's what I'm shocked most about. I can't believe none of these guys are making a play for power. It would be so easy to be a hero at this point. Trump's
going to be he's going to be ineffectual after this election. He's not going to run again. He's not going to have any power in the Republican Party. Nobody's going to listen to him. He has 20 million fans. I mean, 75 million people voted.
Right. Exactly. And those people are going to peel off. There are still even some sort of reasonable people within that group that after yesterday are going to be like, no. It's just he tarnished his brand to a horrible place. I'm shocked that Pence doesn't take this moment because Pence clearly has to see, like, Trump's going to throw him under the bus someday, and if Pence pardons Trump, that's the end of his political career. He can never run again. He's done. Persona non grata. So you think Pence would like have a Brutus moment and just stab him in the back and refuse to pardon him or something. But who knows? You think Pence would be like, yeah, okay, I'll impeach him. You think all of them last night, right? When they had that break, before you so eloquently put it, when they came back and said, hey, we have more in common than we do apart, let's stand up for democracy and do the right thing. And I agree. I watched it all. It was inspiring. It was how it's supposed to work. We are supposed to have two sides of the aisle, but be gentlemen in the end and looking towards the greater good. You would think in that interim, when they just spent the afternoon in the basement of the Capitol or wherever they brought them to, you think they would have said, hey, you know what, guys? I know we've gone along with Trumpism and this Trump guy, but screw this. It's over. Let's go back up there tonight and just bury this guy. And they could have done it. They could have.
They could have been. If you think about it from their perspective, they were on the inside of the room where these people were trying to get in and the people were going nuts. That 3 hours for them must have felt like 3 weeks or 3 months. It must have been like the slowest passage of time, waiting for help to come and waiting for someone to come. I mean, thinking that the Marines are going to come flying up the steps and liberate you and nobody shows. I mean, that's an embarrassment. I mean, at that point, you got to be thinking, why isn't there help coming? And that's when you would start throwing blame back to the Cheeto.
Absolutely. And then see that he tweets while the ashes are still smoldering, those 2 tweets that got taken down where he basically fomented more violence. He was basically like, keep it coming, so yeah, you think they would have had a come to Jesus moment, for lack of a better term, cowering for their lives during a pandemic in a small enclosed space with a bunch of other dudes who are refusing to put on masks. You think they would have been like, screw this. I want to see my grandkids.
Well, I think a lot of them had that because you heard when they came back and you heard a special something in their voice. Right. Where you knew that because you could tell when people were bullshitting you and lying. And yes, Mitch McConnell didn't blame Trump at all. When Schumer went in and really started laying into Trump, you're like, here it is. Right. The crux of what the problem is. But even when McConnell went in, I had a lot of more respect for him after that speech than I've ever had for him opening up his mouth. And the same thing with Mike Pence. I've never heard anything but shit come out of his mouth. And I actually heard him say substance. I heard substance come out of there, and compassion and caring. And to me, these are the things that are lacking from this administration. I would love to see the 25th Amendment. But what everybody's saying is they would invoke the 25th. Then he gets to say, I'm not crazy. Then they put him in a psychological test or whatever for 4 or 5 days. By the time this is done, it's going to be the 20th, where this is all going to be over. What's the worst case scenario of what he could do in the last 2 weeks?
Well, he could attack Iran. He could start some
kind of, actually, that crossed my mind.
Yeah.
That would be into war.
He could activate our military in some kind of international act of warfare and just walk away and just, drop a bomb and just walk away and leave a mess. Because the other part of his personality is he's extremely vindictive, so he wants to make it as hard as possible for Biden to come in and be a successful president. He could do something that would help tank the stock market. He's probably jealous that the market's doing so well. He could do a lot of damage. It's 2 weeks. He could do damage in 24 hours. I mean, and his back's against the wall. He's dangerous. So I agree with you. I think he's going to run out the clock. I don't think they're really going to do anything. And hopefully they keep him sort of sequestered. Because at the very least, everyone knows he's kind of nuts now, right? All the rats are fleeing the ship. Chad Wolf is over in the Middle East right now. All the players that did the lockdown that we all feared that he would, declare martial law. I don't think he has the power to pull any of that off anymore. He's had all the previous Joint Chiefs of Staff come out against him yesterday. So I think he's a pretty hobbled, wounded animal at this point. My guess is he spends another week sitting up in the residence, snorting Adderall and eating Big Macs and, watching Fox News and seeing more and more people turn against him. And then he goes, screw it, I'm out of here. And he flies down to Mar-a-Lago and we don't see him again in an official capacity.
Let us hope. I heard he was supposed to go to Scotland. Isn't that the word?
That's why I said that, because he's banned from Scotland.
Well, everybody's banned from Scotland. Scotland's closed right now, but they told him that he can't come too.
Right. He can't come to play golf. That's what I should have said. Scotland has a lockdown, obviously, because they have a horrible situation like we all do, especially where you live now. So he can't go there to play golf. The leader of Scotland said as much the other day. The interesting thing in that is he had already booked out all the rooms at Turnberry Resort and paid for them. So a Scottish newspaper reported this the other day. So whether or not he goes there or not, he's already grifted taxpayer dollars to pay for Secret Service hotel rooms there. Because just in case he goes there, they logistically have to have a place to stay to protect him and for all the infrastructure it takes. And people don't even report on that stuff in this country. You know, we're so exhausted that David Fahrenthold isn't even bothering to write that one up, you know, and that's part of what he's doing. He's just grifting, taking every dollar he can. You know, you looked at that rally in Georgia the other night. He flew down there on Air Force One and then had Marine Two take him from the airport to where he spoke in Dalton, Georgia. You know, how much money does it cost to bring your own massive helicopter, you know, and 757 to a rally on a Monday night in Georgia? We're paying for that.
Well, he doesn't care about spending our money.
I know, but I'm saying, I know, and that bothers me because people are dying. You know, people are like starving to death, literally, in this country. You know,
it's I've never seen anything like it. That the fact that people are in food lines, right, that he's done nothing for this pandemic. What do you? Someone asked me a question on our first show what do you think? Do you think he actually had COVID?
You know, the first weekend I did, I don't know anymore, and I doubt he did. You know, I mean, I feel less and less like he actually had it because it's just,
you know, that was you know him very well. Right. And him admitting that he had COVID was a pure sign of weakness that he would never admit to. Even, I mean, I don't think he would wanted to admit it to, but it was discovered.
Right.
In the first place, that wasn't something he announced. We found out that the president had COVID, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Ashley, it wasn't Ashley Parker. It was Jennifer. I don't know her last name. It's a very intrepid reporter named Jennifer who broke all those scoops in the White House. Great reporter. I believe she's at the Washington Post. I follow her on Twitter. And she broke it, that Melania had it, that he had it. And that's why I believed he had it too, Jeff, because it was such an ego punch to sort of, I'm weak and I got a virus, like that he wouldn't admit it unless he had to. But that being said, you look at the behavior when he went up there, you know, and the fact that he was bouncing around an SUV. Because if you watch the SUV when he went for that ride on Sunday morning, he was jumping up and down like a psycho. Like it looked like the Joker, you know, like whatever drugs they put him on, he was flying. So he had it, or he had something else like a complication that he doesn't want us to know about because he's got all these other health issues. We know about the visit a year before to Walter Reed that wasn't on the schedule, where he comes running out of the White House with a sheaf of papers in his hand. Like, I know Trump. He doesn't carry anything himself. You know, he's not carrying his own binders unless he has to, you know. So that was either papers or, you know, some kind of like, they used to give him fluids when I worked with him. You know, he's dehydrated because his kidneys are all shot from all the drugs. So it's true. He's got a ton of health issues that they hide, you know, and you saw that little doctor, you know, when he was in Walter Reed, it was like, he's the healthiest guy in the world. Like the guy was just lying to everybody every morning, you know, the Beverly Hills 90210.
Yeah. Well, that's his job though, right?
Sean Conley, you know, who'd also lied about that previous visit to Walter Reed. So who knows, you know, they lie about. Here's the thing about Trump. One of his friends said this. Trump's the kind of guy, you walk up to him and ask him what time of day it is. He looks at his watch and lies to you just for the practice.
But, you know, if you didn't lie for him, you were out of a job. That doctor from Walter Reed lost his job 2 weeks ago, didn't he?
He sure did. He's vindictive. And he just fired somebody else the other day who didn't support him. I can't think of who right now, but he doesn't forget a slight. The guy he's motivated by grievance, which is again why I tell people.
Well, we all saw what happened down in Georgia, and we all saw the major pushback and unbelievable turnout, unbelievable situation that he kind of made that. He kind of threw it, right?
Yeah. Are you talking about the election down there?
Yeah, he threw the election for he was just like because he doesn't want, if he can't win, he doesn't care that his team is winning because it's all about him personally.
Exactly. That's why when he went down there and spoke, he goes, I beat that guy before. I put Brian Kemp in charge, you know, and exactly. He doesn't care about the Republican Party. He wanted them to lose. He wanted to tank that for them. That's why the whole message that came out since November was like, don't show up and vote. The Dominion voting machines are faulty and votes don't count. He wanted to tank that.
So what do you think his plan is for the party and for the next 4 years? I mean, is he just going to sit there and be a scourge to the Republicans more than he is to the Democrats?
Probably, yeah. He'll want everybody to come down and kiss his ring in Mar-a-Lago and to be a kingmaker for the GOP. I don't think that happens anymore. I think yesterday was a watershed moment, that in his hubris and his stupidity, and in his self-centeredness, and only thinking about himself. And if I can just stall this a little bit longer, like, it's happening anyway, dude. You lost. Biden's becoming president, but he was allowing a mob to attack the Capitol to buy a few hours, to give Rudy a little more time to come up with some other cockamamie theory, So that backfired. And I don't think people are going to seek the mob, MAGA mentality to the same extent they would have before. I think it'll take a while for the embers to burn out, but I think a smarter Republican will emerge, a Tom Cotton. We've seen that Josh Hawley's obviously a despicable human being.
Yeah, and both those guys could be up for removal, right?
Exactly. Well, and they should be, especially, you mentioned last night, every one of those guys got up and they said the senator from Texas, and they sneered it. You could hear the contempt for Ted Cruz in their voices, So, and he would get no support from the GOP. He's hated. They hated him when he worked on Bush's campaign in 2000.
Oh, he's the worst.
Yeah, no, he's a horrible human being.
Unbelievable.
And Josh Hawley's a guy who pretends to be battling the elitists. He went to St. Paul's boarding school in London. He went to Yale and Stanford.
I know. To be like a Yale-educated attorney and think you're going to overthrow the Constitution. Right. I mean, these guys are so misguided. So what do they do now? I mean, do they sit there? I mean, because ultimately, for me, if I was a Trumper and I was with him the whole way and I support him through the impeachment, when I heard that hour and 10-minute phone call on Sunday, that would have been the first thing where I was like, you know what? Definitely this guy is not the guy I thought he was. This is evidence. Listening to him talk, this is all bullshit. If I was an open-minded supporter, let's say, not tunnel vision, this is bullshit. I have to, rid myself of this situation and move on. Then let's say you stayed because you were rationalizing enough where you said, okay, I'm still a supporter. Right. And then he does what he did yesterday, and you watch that with your own eyes, with an open mind. You're like, okay, I am totally out. And this is the question I've heard time and time again in all these shows in the past 24 hours. Do you think that he's as powerful as he was before this all happened? And I would say absolutely not, that this is taking the full wind out of his sails, and that Trump is not going to be the political force he was. And he pretty much did it himself in a matter of a week.
Absolutely. I think it was a self-inflicted wound that will harm him. I don't think he ever, for the guy who got away with everything in his whole life, I don't think he gets away with this to a large extent. And until you said that, and you said that very well, I hadn't thought about the fact that we were rolling with that story. That Sunday phone call was a massive story that was interwoven through the election in Georgia, which occurred Tuesday night, and this thing knocked that out of the news, you haven't, and that's Trumpism. 3 days can be like a year worth.
But he topped himself 1,000% with something that hasn't happened on American soil in 200 fucking years. So we've had a phone call in the past year or two, right? So we already knew on the phone, we've heard that call. We had that transcript. We knew what he was like, but here you heard it for the whole hour and 6, and him just trying to be like, but what about this guy? And what about that box of ballots? And what about this dump? And you just I was like, wow, just listening to his mind go. You were listening to him, a lad insane, to quote David Bowie.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the next week, he went 1,000 times past it. And there's no putting that genie back in the bottle. We all know what he is. Even his supporters know. Yes, they're going to try to muddy the waters with, oh, these guys are really Antifa. They're not QAnon. But now that we're identifying through our homegrown terrorist Instagram page.
Exactly.
We'll find these people.
Yeah. But there has to be a price to be paid. You shouldn't get to ransack Speaker Pelosi's office and then go back to work at Fuddruckers the next day.
You think they're going to go round all those guys up?
Yeah, Yeah, I do. I do. I think there'll be repercussions for a lot of. They won't round all of them. There was thousands of people, but the guys that were in the Capitol, the dude with the horns on his head, that guy's going to get in trouble. Like his picture is all over. The guy who looks like Cato Kalin, who's walking out with a lectern. Did you see him? He had the Trump.
How could you miss him? And then everybody's been making memes out of that guy all day today.
Right. So that guy, those guys are going to get charged. It's a massive breach of, those guys they're going to go to prison.
Yeah, it's 10 years according to Trump himself.
Excellent point, man. He's the one who in the summer was like, if you deface a Confederate monument, you're going to get automatic 10 years in jail. Well, they went into Statuary Hall, bro. That's a room full of monuments. That's why it's called that.
Yeah, it was building or monument or deface any kind. It was anything. If you went into a building and you did any kind of damage.
Right. Any federal property. It was in response to what happened in Portland when they attacked the courthouse and stuff, but yeah, no, they're going to get in trouble. The guys dudes were live streaming, they were live streaming their own right wing kind of,
I know. What are you thinking to put that on your own Instagram account? That you're bulletproof?
Right. And not to mention, those are just their own cameras and like the cell phone footage. You know how many cameras are in the Capitol? Do you know how much footage that the law enforcement? There's going to be a whole, there's going to be an airplane hangar full of people looking at every frame of this film for the next 6 months.
You would think they would at least left their masks on.
Right.
You're in the building, there's cameras.
You're allowed to wear a mask right now. For most of our lives, you can't walk into a bank with a mask on. You're allowed to wear a mask. You're about to do the most illegal thing of your life. Put on the mask,
Well, how many people do you think it's going to end up that just went out for a Sunday afternoon protest and end up getting 10 years in jail with no priors?
No, I don't think any of those guys, I think the people that were on the Capitol grounds, the masses will get away with it. Some of them will get called in and fined and, it'll show up on their records. But, I think the specific guys that were in there, the people that led to whatever altercation had that woman shot, because that was, she was shot by a cop, because they were like bum rushing the cop. So anybody involved in that, will end up going to prison. Certainly the people that sat behind the president's desk, in the actual Senate room, that's some major hallowed ground, and they'll make an example out of those guys.
Well, it's all hallowed ground, really, right? When you work there was decorum and respect at all times. You can't go running through the building yelling.
Absolutely. And I loved working up there. I loved it because you took pride in it, and it felt like a violation yesterday. I have family and friends that still work in that area, friends that work on Capitol Hill. I loved working up there. I was a biker, so I was in like bike pants and friendship bracelets, and I liked the fact that I could look like a freak. This is, still kind of deadhead.
Everybody else was in suits and ties and you were like in your bike out.
And they always had school trips, so it'd always be like these hot, school, and I'd be like, hey, I'm the cool guy with a walkie-talkie. I was a cheese ball. But my point is, it was fun. You know what I mean? It was like people were coming from all over the country, to see the machinations of our government and how it worked. And it's a beautiful area too. These are beautiful buildings. And let me say one more thing. Part of it hasn't been reported on, but all the people were in lockdown on either side of the Capitol. All the Senate office buildings, the Hart, the Dirksen, the Russell, the Longworth, all the stuff on the other side. They were cowering under their desks all afternoon. Those people have children. You know what I mean? Imagine those mothers that were hiding under their desks thinking like, am I going to see my kids again? I went to work today, and now I'm hiding. I'm in lockdown in a place that should have been, the safest place on earth. You know where the term ground zero comes from? From the Capitol. That's the zero address. It all fans out from there.
Oh, really?
Yes. So that's ground zero, for our government. That's the most hallowed, should be protected place.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Well, no, I don't know if we solved anything today, but it was certainly good to get in there and stir it up with you because, it's unbelievable what we've seen. And you've been such a force. I want to thank you for coming on the show. Your first episode, still like 100,000 people have tuned in to watch it, which blows away anything else I've done. So I want to thank you for coming on and bringing a little bit of reality in and schooling everybody.
Nice, brother. It's anytime, Jeff. It's always a pleasure.
All right. Keep up the good fight, Noel. And, maybe I doubt it's going to be retirement because there's still going to be a lot to watch, and we're all going to need you to give in your opinion on what's going on.
I won't stop, brother, and I'll come back anytime you want me to, man.
Great. Thanks, Noel. Have a great day, buddy.
Yeah, brother. Bye.
All right. There you go, Noel Casler. I mean, thank you, Noel. What a great show. And just so nice to be able to talk to somebody that's informed and knows what's going on and be able to like get in there. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I saw great comments coming in. Hold on. Let's see. I think he snorts Adderall when he goes a pee-pee. Yes, I think he does too. But Mazer, thank you. She read, oh, this was Kelly. He's saying that Kelly did a 2-minute a press conference, and then she ran out the door and didn't take any questions. Yeah, because thank Mark Joseph. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. Tomorrow we're back. Thanks, Noel. Tomorrow we're back with our friend Billy Nathan from Lantern Farms. He's one of the top growers in Mendocino County. His Green Lantern strain is inside all the shops in California with the Garcia hand-picked. I'm going to have a bunch here. I'm going to smoke in front of you guys so you could all, hang out with me. And, thank you, Paul. Thanks for tuning in. Marina, thank you. It was great, right? Amazing to be able to talk to somebody and bounce real thoughts off of their brains, So thank you all for tuning in. You complete me, all of you. Peace, love, and happiness, everybody out there. There's a big hug. Billy Nathan tomorrow. And, next week we're rolling in the show 200. I never would have thought that I'd be here 200 times. I thought I'd have a job by now. But until they start hiring down at Fuddruckers, fucking great line. Noel had some great lines today. Noel is real. Yes. Thank you. Helda Webb. Noel is a real guy, and it was really great to talk to him. And thank you all for tuning in. We will see you back here tomorrow, 2021. Wow. What a freaking week this has been. Unbelievable. This is day 7, the first 7 days. Just hold on tight, folks. See you tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.